Hey y'all, welcome to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Samantha Leanne and I talk about books. The month of March has honestly felt like one of the longest months of my entire life, partially because I have been out of work due to everything that is going on in the world. And I actually received word a couple of days ago that I am furloughed until further notice. So I'm sure you can imagine that I'm thrilled by this, but we're making the best of it. And by making the best of it, I mean that we're reading a ton, in addition to the fact that I had like a backlog of videos because I was able to make myself film for a while, but like editing is where I would get stuck. Like I just wouldn't feel like editing. So I'm gradually getting caught up on all of those. Let's talk about March, shall we? Coffee all day, every day. Like legit, I make coffee at like 8 o'clock in the morning. Not 8 o'clock in the morning. I've been making coffee at like 8 o'clock at night. My sleep schedule is so fucked up. Since all of this started, I'm like regularly up until at least 3 a.m. and I sleep until like 10:30, and then it feels like half my day is gone, but it's fine. Everything is fine, right? Okay, so talking about the books that I have read, I did a poll and asked if you guys wanted me to split this or not, and you did not, because I read 16 books. That's a lot to talk about. I did go ahead and decide though that instead of going through in the order in which I read them, I am going to talk about the horror books first and then the non-horror at the end. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm going to start with the horror. If you are not into horror and you don't want to know anything about any of the horror books that I have read, you can go ahead and skip to this timestamp, which will be somewhere on the screen, and that will take you to the section that is non-horror. Let's talk about my overall stats real quick. So 16 books, I said 16 books, which is great. Comes out to a total of 4,891 pages, which is roughly 158 pages a day. Formatting, 13 physical books and 3 audiobooks, which means that 13 were books that I owned and 3 are from the library. 10 of the authors that I read this month were women and only 6 were men. So that's pretty good compared to the last 2 months. For genre, it's basically split right down the middle. So I did read 8 horror books, 3 thrillers, 2 fantasy, 1 contemporary, and 1 historical fiction. And then star breakdown, we had 3 5-star, 8 4-star, and 5 3-star, 3 3.5 in that general vicinity. The first book that I read this month is her Fearful Symmetry. Now you guys actually just saw this in a book haul. I'm proud to say that several of the books that you guys just saw in the book haul, I actually did end up reading this month. So that's pretty cool. I gave this one 4 stars. I categorized it as a horror, but it's not like super overt. There's no gore or anything that's involved. It's really just a like paranormal, almost psychological, but kind of not. So basic plot is you have a set of twins that grew up together, and due to things that happened, they have grown apart. They have not spoken in a very long time. One lives in the UK and one lives in the United States. Well, the one that lives in the United States, she has a set of twins of her own. We're gonna call her the aunt. So the aunt of these 2 girls who lives in the UK dies of, I think, cancer or something. And in her will, she says, I will leave all of this stuff to my nieces, but they have to come and stay in my apartment for a year. Just a year. And once they do that, they can have the money, they can sell the apartment, they can do whatever they want. So the set of twins go to live in the apartment. Slowly we begin to learn why the 2 sisters were estranged and how that is affecting the current sisters and what happens. I don't want to say too much just because I personally like going into books as blind as possible, but that's the basic plot of the book. I did enjoy the writing. I will say that a couple of things that were a little bit strange to me is there's a couple of side characters in this book that I don't really understand their purpose, and there's a storyline about one of these characters that, again, he ends up being kind of a means to an end, but I feel like she gave him a little bit more screen time, page time than was strictly necessary, so it ended up feeling just a little bit bloated. It's a ghost story, pretty much. It's a ghost story. It's that paranormal ghost, whatever, which is why I included it in the horror category. While I did enjoy it, I did find aspects of it to be pretty predictable. I actually remember at one point, I messaged Jake and I was like, this isn't gonna make any sense to you, but I am going to say this just because I wanna check back later and see if I am right. And I kind of like went point by point on what was going to happen throughout the end of the book, and I knew exactly what was going to happen, but it was still enjoyable to me. The entertainment factor was there. So, and the writing was good. I would read more by her. So yeah, I ended up giving it 4 stars. I really liked it. Next is one of my 5-star reads for this month, and that is Summer of Night by Dan Simmons. Darren, can you please not? Anyway, so 5 stars, loved this. A mistake that I made in the book haul that I did, I said that this was like a vampire story, and it's not. I think that I assumed because it was Summer of Night and vampires come out at night. Generally, I think that's why I had assumed that. So it's not vampires, but it is still very good. It gives me vibes of like It, because you have this friend group, but not. That's like the least helpful description I've ever given in a book, ever. But I will say that the friend group dynamic isn't as well done as it is done in It. So if you're expecting like that really, really well done dynamic, you're not gonna find that here. But I still did really like it. I really enjoyed the writing in general, the writing style. It is fairly long, and it almost feels like it has sort of a slow burn quality to it, which I don't hate because y'all know I love a good slow burn. I really love the atmosphere. I really love the way that the sense of dread was built as you went on and as you discovered a little bit more about the entity that is sort of infiltrating this town and has infiltrated it for a very long time. And it was a little bit more untraditional than some of the horror books that I've read. So it was like slightly paranormal, but the cause had a root in myth and legend. And so I did find that to be really interesting. It's something that I haven't seen a lot in the horror that I have read thus far. So I did really enjoy that aspect of it. And just in general, I thought this book was really, really good. And while I am talking about it, I'm going to go ahead and put this book down, because I think that I rated that one 4 stars. And then I had the sequel, A Winter Haunting, available from my library via audio. So I did decide to go ahead and read that. I think I read a couple of books in between. Now, I don't know if this is just supposed to be a duology. I think it is just a duology. I did enjoy it. I think I gave that one 4 stars. It wasn't as good as Summer of Night, but the story picks up one of the characters that we have met in Summer of Night several years later. He's kind of down on his luck. He's a writer who's been writing for a while, and he's kind of like washed up. He had gone to live in like the Midwest, like Montana, I'm pretty sure, and ends up back in his hometown of Illinois, and actually rents out the farmhouse of one of the boys that he grew up with. And strange things begin to happen while he's there. Ghost of his past, exploring the entity from the first book just a little bit more, but also it really goes into depth about like mental health and what that can look like. Definite trigger warning there for like suicidal thoughts, so just be aware of that. So again, it wasn't as strong, but I did enjoy it a good bit. Next book I'm going to talk about is Hex, and the premise of it was really cool, and I ended up only giving it 3 stars. It just kind of fell the slightest bit flat for me. It wasn't bad by any means, but I just didn't love it the way that I was expecting. So this is a cool kind of haunting story, but it has a little bit more of a modern twist. And so you have this witch who is kind of haunting this town because of events that had happened years and years before. And she is very dangerous. She has the ability to make you kill yourself. And so she just kind of like shows up at random points, and they have this like whole system in the town that kind of tracks where she is. There is a group of boys that are almost trying to expose the town and this whole thing that's happened, because it's not like common knowledge. And the reason that they're kind of trying to go through and do this is because, you know, they kind of feel like a little bit stuck, you know, teenagers, that kind of thing, and they're essentially like under quarantine. But while the idea I thought was really good, and it could have been something really great, the execution for me just didn't necessarily work. And I think that it had a little bit to do with the writing style. The end also wasn't awesome, if I'm being honest. I just didn't love the way that it ended, and an ending will make or break something for me. So this was very just okay. I'm kind of undecided on whether or not I'm gonna unhaul it. Honestly, I probably will. Again, I didn't hate it. If you like, again, if the idea intrigues you the way that it did me, I mean, I would definitely say pick it up, give it a shot. Next, I decided to pick up The Resort by Bentley Little. This is the first Bentley Little that I had ever read. I know that Bentley Little is a well-loved horror author, but this was my first experience with his writing. And so the plot of this centers around this family. They are going to go on vacation, and they find this website for this resort in the middle of the desert, and the prices are just like too good to be true. And they're like, hell yeah, let's take a trip. It is a family unit, parents and 2 twin boys and a younger boy. And so they get to this resort. Weird things start happening, and it's the staff that's being so weird. Every time something happens and they think, God, this is so fucking weird, like maybe we should go, they just kind of like stop caring and continue to like go on about their day. And so like they're kind of stuck there in a sense. Things continue to be weird and things just kind of devolve. And that's all I'm gonna say about the plot. Not having experienced Bentley's writing before, I was a little bit taken aback by the overt sexuality. There's a really big portion of this that focuses on sex and sex acts that like would seem deviant. And what I think he was trying to do here is, one of the things about this resort is that it brings behavior out in people that they wouldn't normally participate in. So things that we would normally consider shameful, whether that be violence or sex acts or whatever. And so that's part of what the entity surrounding this plot did. And so I get what he was doing, but I still didn't love it. It was just like real weird, like how descriptive he got at points. Just wasn't necessarily my cup of tea, but again, like I got why he did it. I ended up giving this one 3 stars, but I wasn't really 100% sure how I felt about it until I got to the end. So I liked it, it was okay. 3 stars, and then I immediately after this one picked up another one, and that is The Association. And so this one is about this couple that finally found their dream home, and they move into this neighborhood, and it has an HOA association, which this idea really intrigued me because I also live in a neighborhood that has an HOA, and my HOA is amazing. I don't recommend living somewhere with an HOA. I'll just leave it at that. They sign their lives away on this mortgage and this house, and they love it, and they start doing renovations, and then weird shit starts happening. And they realize it's the HOA, and there are people in the neighborhood that are really supportive of the HOA, and then there's like another group of people that's like, fuck you guys. Just things keep progressing and getting worse and worse and worse and worse until you kind of like come to the end and then figure out, you know, exactly what's kind of been going on from the beginning. I really liked this book. I liked this one better than The Resort, actually. I think one of the things that I liked about this was it's just like, it's real life in that HOAs can be monsters, but one of the things that I also really like is that, you know, you have the resort and the association, and like these are things that are kind of like real life, right? And there's a lot of satire that's woven into his books. And so one of the things that was really interesting to me is that the main character of this book actually is a horror author himself. And so I thought to myself, I wonder if he's had like shitty experiences with an HOA and like kind of, you know, like built this story. This book was very meta in that, because as things started happening, you know, and he would tell his wife, like, this thing fucking happened, and his wife would be like, are you just like trying out a new story idea on me? Like, what are you doing here? So it was really interesting that they're talking about like, you know, this is a horror book inside of a horror book, you know. I thought that was a really fun aspect of it, but I gave this one 4 stars. I'm really looking forward to actually reading more from Bentley Little. And the next book that I read is actually a novella, and this I also got from my library. It is Rolling in the Deep by Mira Grant, who, for those of you that don't know, is Shauna Maguire. So this is a precursor to Into the Drowning Deep. One of the plot points in Into the Drowning Deep, they're going to the same place to explore and to try and figure out exactly what happened to the first crew that ended up in this location, right? And boy, oh boy, do they get more than they bargained for. No, well, Into the Drowning Deep, they get more than they bargained for. And so this novella tells the story of the first crew. So I'm not gonna like go into detail. I think for it being novella, like she did a really good job of like building the suspense and the terror and the horror that go along with her full-length novel. So I did enjoy that. I think that you can really read either of them first. Like you could read Into the Drowning Deep because they go into detail about the first mission. So you could really read Rolling in the Deep first and then Into the Drowning Deep, or vice versa, which is what I did. I don't think that you need to read the prequel first. Like I don't think that's a requirement, but I did enjoy it. So, and the last book from the horror genre that I read this month is True Crime. So this is another novella length. And this is the story of 2 siblings, Susie and Lim, who come from a very bad situation at home. Things happen at home and they go on a road trip to escape what has happened at home, and things in murder and insanity. And this is intense. I gave this 4 stars. It is very well done. I will warn you, this is one of those horror books that is not for the faint of heart. She definitely packs a very serious punch for it being as short as it is. There are a lot of elements of sexual assault, as well as, you know, some gore and other things of that nature. So just be very aware if that's something that you are not into. I don't recommend picking this up. This was actually sent to me by the author. It's from an indie press, which is nice. But wow, there's just some really intense stuff that happens in here. I did really enjoy the writing style. So for those of you that are like into that really intense brand of horror, I definitely recommend you pick this up. I know right now it is available on Kindle for, I want to say, $3.99. I did go ahead and pick up the Kindle copy, even though I did get the ARC just so that I could give the author a little bit of support. This was, of course, before I was furloughed, so love that. But anyway, yes, so 4 stars. I did really, really like this. Okay, so now we're going to switch gears. We're going to talk about genres that are not horror. So we have gotten halfway through right now, so let's just keep on trucking. So let's move right into thrillers. So the first thriller that I'm going to talk about is You Are Not Alone by Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen. I have read all 3 of the books that these authors have put out together. The first was The Wife Between Us, which I really loved. That one was really great. An Anonymous Girl was very like so-so, and this was better than Anonymous Girl, but still not good as Wife Between Us. So this is about I think she's like a 20-something. She's a data analyst. She's working as a temp currently. She lives with this guy that she's kind of in love with, but he has a girlfriend and things are getting a little weird between them because of that. So there's just a lot of things in her life right now that she's very unsure of. She gets up one morning, she's gonna go work on her resume, work on a couple of things at a coffee shop or a restaurant or something somewhere. So it takes place in New York, I'm pretty sure. She's on the subway platform and she sees this woman and they kind of lock eyes, and then this woman jumps to her death. And so the whole experience of seeing someone commit suicide is very traumatic for her. She has a lot of feelings, and she really begins to struggle with that. And she really felt like this girl that she saw this happen to, like, had this weird connection. And so she endeavors to find out a little bit more about her. Well, that sends red flags to a group of women that this woman was associated with. The girl, whose name is Shay, that saw this happen, kind of becomes entangled in all of these things that are happening. Parts of the pacing in this dragged just a little bit. I think that it could have been cut down a little bit more. There were aspects of it that were pretty predictable. There were a couple of they probably wouldn't actually do that moments, but I will say that there was one reveal in here that actually did get me. And so that's one of the reasons that I liked it a little bit more than Anonymous Girl, because like you saw what was going a mile away, which, to be fair, like you definitely did see what was coming in this for the most part a good bit of the time, but there was that one twist that like got me. So yeah, it was pretty okay. Next thriller is Turn the Key. This is another one that you guys saw in the book haul that I did post, and I ended up giving this one 4 stars. So in this book, you have Rowan. She is looking for a new job, and she stumbles across this ad for a nanny, a full-time live-in nanny. The conditions of it seem a little bit too good to be true. So she says, fuck it, I'm gonna apply for it anyway and see what happens. Well, she ends up getting the position. But here's the thing. One of the reasons that it seems too good to be true is these people that she's now working for are having trouble keeping a nanny because these crazy things keep happening in the house that they're working in. And she's like, oh, it'll be fine. Like, it's good. As she continues to stay there and, you know, be with the children and live in the house and be on the grounds, weird things do start happening. And so she's not 100% sure if this is a job that she should have taken or not. There's a lot going on with this book. You definitely have kind of that unreliable narrator. You can't really tell if she's telling the truth or not. But I did really enjoy the way that it was written. Like, it's told from first person perspective. Rowan herself is telling the story. And so the emotion that comes across in the writing and like how she felt during these occurrences and things that were happening, like that felt really authentic. And so I did really like it. But for a thriller, I thought that this one was really good and it made me interested to read more of Ruth Ware's writing. But I will say that I've heard that this is one of the better ones. So I'm kind of like, do I even want to touch the other one? So I don't know, but I did really like this. If you're a fan of thrillers, but you kind of stayed away from writings because because of that, then I would definitely recommend still picking this one up. And the last thriller that I read for the month is The Sundown Motel by Simone St. James. This is yet again another one that you guys saw in the book haul, and I ended up giving this one 4 stars. This is about a girl whose aunt disappears while she's working at the Sundown Motel. Years ago, it's an unsolved case. They never found out what happened to her. They have no idea, right? And as she does research, she becomes kind of obsessed with this. And as she continues to do research, she figures out, wow, there's a lot of girls that actually did go missing from this town that this hotel is living in. So I think it's after the death of her mother. This girl ends up, I think she's going to New York or something. But she stops off in this town just to kind of see what she can find out while she's there. And as she's there, she really begins to uncover things and figure out what happened. This story is told from dual timelines. You have the timeline with Carly, who's the young girl who's doing the research. You have that kind of doing the investigating and trying to figure out what's going on. And then you also are getting the perspective of Viv, the woman that disappeared, or her aunt all those years ago, through the form of like diaries and stuff. And so I really like the way that was done. There's also a really heavy paranormal element to this that I wasn't necessarily expecting, but I should have been, seeing as another book that I read by her. There was that paranormal element in that book as well, but I did really love the atmosphere that all of that really created through this book. So yeah, I ended up really enjoying this one. Definitely recommend. Next, I am going to talk about The Deep by Alma Katsu. I was really looking forward to this book because I read The Hunger a couple of years ago. Absolutely loved that. And then I also read her Taker trilogy last year as well, and also very much enjoyed that. So I was really looking forward to this one. And this is the historical fiction book that I was talking about, but there's a very clear paranormal element to it. And so I would call this a lot more historical fiction than I would paranormal. There is that paranormal element to it, but it does, to me, focus a lot more on like the historical fiction aspect of it, which isn't a bad thing because I love historical fiction. If you don't like historical fiction and you think that you're getting a horror out of this, don't pick it up. I don't think that you would necessarily enjoy it, but I really liked it. I gave it 4 stars. I thought that the build, as you start to figure out exactly what's happening, aboard the Titanic, because that's where it takes place, the Titanic. I can't believe I didn't say that. It takes place part on the Titanic and then part on the sister ship of the Titanic, which later becomes like a hospital ship during the war. So you have both of those perspectives going on, and the story is slowly revealed as you go. So I really love Alma Katsu's writing style just in general, in the way that she was able to really weave the paranormal aspect of it with the historical fiction. I thought was really interesting. I've not read a ton about like the Titanic and that kind of thing. And it was a fun twist on perhaps how the tragedy of the Titanic came to be. So I really liked it. I would recommend, if you are a fan of historical fiction, if you're a fan of horror and not historical fiction, I would maybe skip this one out. But I still liked it. So now we're going to move on to the couple of contemporaries that I did read this month. And the first one that we're going to talk about is Fried Green Tomatoes and the Whistle Stop Cafe. As a Southern woman, born and raised, I have seen Fried Green Tomatoes I don't know how many times. It's like on par with like that, Steel Magnolias. Like, those are 2 movies that just I absolutely loved. And I loved this book even more than I loved the movies. The movie is such a good and true representation of the book. So I will say that the movie is excellent. And as you're watching the movie, like, it's such a good and, like I said, true representation of this book. It's just the book gives you a little bit more. The book gives you a little bit more insight into like thoughts and feelings and that kind of thing. And so I loved that even more than the movie. I just really, I'm not going to talk about the plot because I feel like most people know because of the film what the plot is. The book is always better. Well, not always, but the book is more often than not always better, and this is a good example of that. But that movie is still like so well done, and I love this story so much. I can't watch the movie without like bawling like a crazy person. And there were moments in this that like really got me, because like I'm remembering those scenes and how that makes me feel. And then there's also like the added emotion of, you know, like you feel like you understand the characters even that much more by reading the book. So yes, I loved this book. If you haven't read it because you've seen the movie, I would recommend reading it anyway, because it's really good. So this was another one of my 5-star reads. And my other 5-star read this month is Daisy Jones and the Six. So let me be very clear about something. I am holding the physical book in my hand, right? And I did count this as a physical book that I read versus an audiobook. However, I did not love the formatting of this book. So this book tells the story of Daisy Jones and the Six, which was a band a fictional band in the late 60s. And this kind of tells about their story and their rise to fame, right? So this is told from varying perspectives of different people and like little snippets of interviews. And so it makes this a slog to read through. And I started reading it and I was like, I don't know, man. And then I remembered people saying that the audiobook was full cast. And so I was like, all right, well, it's available for my library right now, so let me just go ahead and grab it. Y'all, the audiobook is so good. It's full cast, so you get each of the people telling the story like as they go. When you're hearing somebody's voice telling a story, like to me, sometimes you get a little bit more out of it, especially since this is told in like interview format, right? And sometimes it would be like, this person would tell a little snippet and they're talking about the same event. So like this person would tell a little snippet and then this person would tell a little snippet and like so on and so forth. And so like it made it to me a little bit easier to like give each of these people a distinct personality, versus when you're reading it, you don't really get that, right? So originally, whenever I read it and finished it, I was like, I'm going to give this book 4 stars because I didn't like the formatting. But the more that I thought about it, like I couldn't stop thinking about it. So the more that I thought about it, I ended up giving it 5 stars. I really loved the story, and I just really loved like the whole vibe, like the 60s, early 70s vibe, and talking about, you know, all of these different artists that they went on tour with, and like, you know, really Taylor Jenkins Reid does emotion really, really well. I loved it. The audiobook, like, y'all, don't pick up the physical book. Like, don't do it. Just skip it altogether. Strictly listen to the audiobook, because the audiobook is just so well done. There's still several more Taylor Jenkins Reid book that I need to read, and I just haven't yet. So anyway, I love her writing. I loved the story. So yeah, listen to the audiobook of this. It's so good. So the 2 fantasy books that I read this month, this is A Nancy Boys by Neil Gaiman, and I liked this. I didn't like love it. It wasn't my favorite. I read American Gods a couple of years ago, and I think if you've read American Gods, you have kind of a precursor for the characters that are in these books. This is the story of Fat Charlie Nancy, who lives somewhere in the UK and has kind of an estranged relationship with his father, and his father drops dead, and then he goes to Florida to attend the funeral and learns a little bit more about him and maybe why he was the way that he was, and also learns that he has a brother. Ends up coming into contact with his brother, and things don't exactly go well. One of the things that I really loved about this book, what Neil Gaiman does very well, is he takes those stories, those folklore stories, fairy tales, whatever you want to call them, and weaves them into this modern story. He's always done that so very well. If you have ever read American Gods, is a very, very good example of that as well. Just, you know, the fairy tale element is something that I really love and something that he does really well. So I ended up giving it 3 stars. Again, like I didn't love it, but I still love Neil Gaiman's writing. I love this story. It was a good story. So, and the last book that I'm going to talk about is King of Scars by Leigh Bardugo. So this is the first book in the Nikolai duology. This is after the events of Six of Crows. This is after the events of the Grisha trilogy, obviously. And so there are characters from both of those within this book. So I'll say that it was kind of nice to, you know, like revisit those characters, those old friends, whatever. I didn't like have any particular like love for this story, if we're being honest. It was okay. I gave it 3 stars. Like, I'm not dying to read the next book. If we're being honest, I actually ended up unhauling Grisha trilogy not that long ago. I did keep the Six of Crows duology because I did really enjoy those stories. And again, like, I did enjoy this. It was fun. It just wasn't like, oh my God, this is the best. Like, I'll probably read the second book when it does come out, just because I have read this one, but I'm not gonna like run out and get it. I'll probably wait until I can get it from my library. So, but it was pretty okay. And those are all the books that I read in the month of March. So I'm thinking that April is going to look very, very similar. If you guys felt like this video was too long and think that I should split it up in the next wrap up, let me know down below. I'm hoping providing timestamps helps. But yeah, have you read any of these books? If you have, comment down below and let me know what you thought of them. Remember to please keep it spoiler free for people who have not read these books yet. If you do want to talk spoilers, remember you can find all of my social media links in the down bar below. You can get at me on Twitter, Goodreads, or Instagram. I don't necessarily post all the time, but I do check messages and that sort of thing. So if you're new here, hi, hello, and welcome. If you like what you see and you want to see more, you can click thumbs up. You can hit subscribe if you haven't already. You can also click the little bell, doodad, to be notified of any videos that I continue to upload. So yeah, that's all I have for you guys today. I'm gonna stop talking because I've been talking too long. So thank you guys, and I will see you all next time. Bye.